Hey, my fifth grade friends, Mrs. Real here with a story for you today. We've been reading Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing. We're going to take a slight pause from that. I'll get a couple more chapters into you later on today. But we're going to take a break from a couple of lessons, and I have a different book for you today. I told you that we were doing Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing because I had a science connection to make. And so we're going to stop and do a little bit of the science part so that once we get to the next step in Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing, you'll have a background to do some designing. So my book today, one of my all-time favorites, Rosie Revere, Engineer. It's my favorite for a lot of reasons. Girl power is one of them. Making things is another. But one of my favorite reasons is that one of my first couple of years at teaching at Gale School, when I was teaching first grade, I had a student in my class. And as soon as I read this book, I knew it was all about Cameron. Her name was Cameron. She always had stuff in her desk, random stuff that she would find at lunch or out on the playground or out of her lunchbox or wherever she could find it. There was always some kind of collection, and she was working with that stuff to turn it into other stuff. So after lunch, when I was reading stories to the kids, she would be sitting in her desk and her hands were in there and she was always fidgeting. And I would go over there and there might be a plastic spoon and a marble and a piece of twine and some tag from a bag that she found. And she was always creating. And even though we were like, stop, you need to pay attention, it didn't matter. She was always creating. The fun news about this whole story is that Cameron is now almost done with college and she's going to be an engineer because that's what engineers do. They take pieces and parts and gadgets and put them together in smart ways to make new things. So I'm going to be reading you this story, and then I'm going to make a video after that to talk about how to put things together to make cool things. So here we go with Rosie Revere, Engineer. Rosie Revere, Engineer. This is the story of Rosie Revere, who dreamed of becoming a great engineer. In Lila Greer's classroom at Blue River Creek, young Rosie sat shyly, not daring to speak. She's right here. But when no one saw her, she peeked in the trash for treasures to add to her engineer's stash. And late at night, Rosie rolled up her sleeves and built in her hideaway under the eaves. So here's her collection. She's adding to it a broken tennis racket, an umbrella, a cord, cup out of the trash. Alone in her attic, the moon high above, dear Rosie made gadgets and gizmos she loved. And when she grew sleepy, she hid her machines far under the bed where they'd never be seen. So you could spend quite a bit of time looking at this page. When Rosie was young, she had not been so shy. She worked with her hair swooping over one eye and made fine inventions for uncles and aunts, a hot dog dispenser, and helium pants. The uncle she loved most was zookeeper Fred. She made him a hat to keep snakes off his head. From parts of a fan and some cheddar cheese spray, which everyone knows keeps the pythons away. See all the cheese spraying out. And when it was finished, young Rosie was proud, but Fred slapped his knee and he chuckled out loud. He laughed till he wheezed and his eyes filled with tears, all to the horror of Rosie Revere, who stood there embarrassed, perplexed, and dismayed. She looked at the cheese hat and then looked away. I love it, Fred hooted. Oh, truly I do. But Rosie Revere knew that could not be true. She stuck the cheese hat on the back of her shelf, and after that day kept her dreams to herself. And that's how it went until one autumn day, her oldest relation showed up for a stay. Her great-great-aunt Rose was a true dynamo who'd worked building airplanes a long time ago. She told Rosie tales of the things she had done and goals she had checked off her list one by one. So here she is. This is her thought bubble where she used to build airplanes. She gave a sad smile as she looked to the sky. The only thrill left on my list is to fly. But time never lingers as long as it seems. I'll chalk that one up to an old lady's dreams. That night, as Rosie lay wide awake in bed, a daring idea crept into her head. Could she build a gizmo to help her aunt fly? She looked at the cheese hat and said, nope, not I. But questions are tricky, and some hold on tight, and this one kept Rosie awake through the night. So when dawn approached and red streaks lit the sky, young Rosie knew just how to make her aunt fly. She worked and she worked till the day was half gone, then hauled her cheese copter out onto the lawn to give her invention a test just to see the ridiculous flop it might turn out to be. I love how she's using the skateboards to help her wheel out onto the lawn. All right, hang on, guys. The words go crazy on this one. Strapped into the cockpit, she flipped on the switch. The helio cheese copter sputtered and twitched. It floated a moment and whirled round and round, then froze for a heartbeat and crashed to the ground. Then Rosie heard laughter and turned round to see the old woman laughing and slapping her knee. She laughed till she wheezed and her eyes filled with tears, all to the horror of Rosie Revere, who thought, oh no, never, not ever again will I try to build something to sputter or spin, or build with a lever, a switch, or a gear, and never will I be a great engineer. She turned round to leave, but then great-great-aunt Rose grabbed hold of young Rosie and pulled her in close, and hugged her and kissed her and started to cry. You did it! Hooray! It's the perfect first try. This great flop is over. It's time for the next. Young Rosie was baffled, embarrassed, perplexed. I failed, said dear Rosie. It's just made of trash. Didn't you see it? The cheese copter crashed. Yes, said her great aunt, it crashed, that is true. But first, it did just what it needed to do. Before it crashed, Rosie, before that, it flew. Your brilliant first flop was a raging success. Come on, let's get busy and on to the next. She handed a notebook to Rosie Revere, who smiled at her aunt as it all became clear. Life might have its failures, but this was not it. The only true failure can come if you quit. There's some really awesome drawings and designs of other flying machines. They worked till the sun sneaked away to its bed. Aunt Rose tied her headscarf around Rosie's head and sent her to sleep with a smile ear to ear to dream the bold dreams of a great engineer. At Blue River Creek, all the kids in grade 2 build gizmos and gadgets and doohickeys too. With each perfect failure, they all stand and cheer, but none quite as proudly as Rosie Revere. The end. All right, my friends, so just knowing that nothing is perfect the first time. You gotta keep trying. And then you learn from what you did and you make it better and you keep on going. So that's the end of the story of Rosie Revere, engineer. And I'll be making another video shortly as Rosie Revere, engineer part 2 to talk about all the gizmos and gadgets and things that are there. So I hope you enjoyed the story and I'll see you again soon.